and welcome back to Cinematic Sarcastic, podcast that talks all things movies and television. I'm Natalie, and I'm your host. Now, on this episode, which is the 100th podcast episode, woot woot, we are going to talk about Wolfpack. This is a new drama series starring Sarah Michelle Gellar. It just dropped. I think there's only one episode out so far, and there's a lot to unpack here. Now, I will say, as far as Wolfpack goes, I have learned my lesson that perhaps it would behoove me to Google some of these shows before I start watching them. You show me Sarah Michelle Gellar and you tell me that she is coming back into a supernatural television series, I'm just going to tune in. I'm just going to do that. And for some reason, I had a much different expectation of what this television series was going to be than the reality of this television series. Now, I don't know why I expected anything different. I don't know what I was thinking, but in my mind, I was like, oh, well, Sarah Michelle Gellar already did Buffy, which I loved. You know, as a teenager, I watched every single season, every single episode. I watched the Angel spinoff. Like, I was there for it. So for some reason, wrongly, I would add, in my mind, I was like, oh, she's going to do like a supernatural werewolf television series, but she's all grown up now. So it's going to be an all grown up werewolf television series. And so I was like, excellent. I am going to love this. Nope. We did not love this. And by we, I mean me and my inner child that still really loves Buffy. I didn't know. We'll just come right out of the gate and say I didn't know that this was a teen fiction book, and I didn't know that this was going to be a teen drama television series. That became painfully clear when there was very little to no Sarah Michelle Gellar in this television series. Like, I feel a little bit robbed. I get that it is only the first episode so far, so I don't know how much, you know, she will be in the series going forward, but it gave me the same sort of feeling as watching like the Willow reboot or remake or continuation, whatever, where now the main character has become the side character. Like, Sarah Michelle Gellar is kind of the name that will draw in an audience without ever having to really show her to the audience. I would say 90% of Wolfpack is just horrible teenage acting and a story that doesn't make that much sense. And then Sarah Michelle Gellar gets one line. Yep, one. I've never been so disappointed. I'm sure she will be in the show more as the show goes on. I am not willing to subject myself to the awful that is this television series in order to see Sarah Michelle Gellar. Honestly, she deserves better than this show. She deserves like an adult supernatural series that is written specifically for her, where she is the main character. Buffy deserves that, if nothing else. You know, I don't know. I don't think it's fair, we'll say it that way, for her to go from like the headliner, i.e. the star that is Buffy, to just some secondary nobody character so far in the first episode that has absolutely nothing to do with any of the actual main characters. That was very disappointing to me. So the story of Wolfpack, for anyone that is not familiar, is that it takes place in California, obviously, and there is a wildfire that is basically just wreaking havoc. This bit, or this part of the story, kind of just rubbed me the wrong way from get-go. Like, it didn't make very much sense. Like, I live in Colorado. I think I've mentioned that a few times before. Obviously, we are just as familiar in Colorado with wildfires as some places in California are, you know, familiar with wildfires. So we have some general idea of how those look, how those behave, what that should look like. I don't have any problem with them kind of using a devastating tragedy as the means with which this creature comes and goes. It seems that they've tied it into the story that these wildfires are of a supernatural origin and that it is tied to the werewolf somehow. What I did have a problem with in this show was that clearly they did no research as to how wildfires actually behave. And it almost seemed like the damage was conditional on whether or not a main character was going to be near it. So the show starts out with the two teenage kids, Everett and Blake, and they are on a school bus. And for some reason, the traffic is like backed up as the wildfire is coming towards the actual road that they are on. And this I found a little bit inaccurate, I feel like, to how it would have been, because I don't think anyone would have been in that area and been caught off guard considering how large this wildfire was. Like, it is something that for sure people would have known about well in advance. So I don't understand like how you get trapped in a school bus, you know? That being said, for some reason, the school bus driver is like, no, we're going to trap all of the kids in here. You're not going to be able to flee for your lives. You will burn alive in this school bus, which didn't make very much sense to me. Like, not that I would understand what her options were. You know, I don't know the legalities of just letting your cargo off of the bus and run loose when there is a wildfire going on. But when you are stuck in traffic and you can actually see the flames out the window, perhaps figuring out some sort of, you know, thing to do, i.e. a exit strategy, would have been my first like guess of what to do as the only adult in this scenario. But no, instead, the teens end up kind of like fighting with each other. They get off the bus. And then for some strange reason, all of these animals, all of them are CGI, by the way, deer and bighorn sheep and things like that, come running out of the forest and are just like goring these kids, like just goring them. And the thing that sort of surprised me is they mention it later, like, oh, it's not the animal's fault. They're fleeing. They were on fire. They're all injured. But when you see them, the only animal that I remember being injured, on fire, in any way looking like it had just come out of a wildfire was this one bighorn sheep that was on fire, but even it wasn't behaving like a real animal. It was just like majestically standing there. I don't know. It is what it is. But as we go on, we figure out that somehow these two main characters have been bitten by the werewolf. Both of their bites look more like human bites than a werewolf bite. Like, it doesn't look like an animal bite, but we never see the werewolf in a person form. He's only ever a werewolf form. And I think being bitten by a werewolf would probably be like a bigger, like when you see the size of it, this werewolf, and the damage that it potentially has done, like the small bites that the main characters have are almost comical. like he would have ripped their heads off. But anyway, they both get bitten in different areas. You don't see really how either of them are injured or why they were ever even near the werewolf. I don't know. They never explain it, but they are bitten. And so it kind of just shows them, I guess, transitioning in the first episode. You get to learn, you know, that they have special powers, i.e. the werewolves in this show can communicate through mirrors. I don't know why that's a thing. I've never heard that before. It's interesting, but it's like, I don't know how that's I don't know. Anyway, it's not important whether or not werewolves can communicate through mirrors. Not important. But through the whole entire show, there were just so many things that I feel like they did because it made sense in the story, but it doesn't make sense in a realistic way. Not that it should, because of course supernatural, but the motivations of the characters and like what they're doing kind of just happen for the sake of being able to show something and not necessarily because it's something that a real person would do. Like, for instance, Blake is one of the characters. Her dad is a real piece of work, and they end up going to this like shady motel that I guess she's been at before in order to escape the oncoming fire because it's going to hit their home and like they have to evacuate. She decides for no reason to leave and walk back to her house that is supposed to catch fire. And I don't know what the time frame between when she leaves the hotel and like when she gets back to her house is, but it's like the fire just blew through in like 4 seconds. The time that it took them to drive from their house to the motel and then her to walk back from the motel to their house, the house is like the whole neighborhood basically has been gone through. And when she's walking down her own street, this is the part that kind of irritated me the most. Every single one of the cars on the street is completely decimated. Like it's just a metal, you know, scraps of cars. Like the paint is gone, the seats are gone. Like they've just been completely burned through. But the houses are still standing. And her house is in good enough condition that basically the front of the house, like the house of, you know, exterior, looks almost identical to how it did before it got burned. Like I think there's one tiny part of the roof that has been burned through. And for a devastating fire that is like, they show images of the size of this fire. For a fire like that to burn through, like there would be nothing left of that house for her to go in. But it's there specifically so that she can have an encounter. Well, the two main characters really can have an encounter with the actual werewolf. And it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that the wildfire would decimate all of the cars on the street, but barely touch any of the houses. It doesn't make sense that she left the hotel to go back to the house. Like, what's the purpose? Why would there not have been roadblocks, police officers, firefighters stopping her from going back there? Because they wouldn't just let you walk down the street. There is not a firefighter in fucking sight in this television series. And another thing that super irritated me is that there is a brother and sister who obviously are werewolves already. They're characters that are brought up, and they're brought in because their stepfather or adoptive father, who I believe is played by Rodrigo Santoro, he's missing. And they're like, well, he's a park ranger, you know, he knows fires and yada yada. How? He's not a fireman. I don't know why they didn't just make him a firefighter. That would have made more sense. I don't know that I've ever known a park ranger to just walk headlong into a ginormous fire and not have gear, not have anything to like save himself from the flames. Like he has nothing. And at one point you see him like walking through the woods and he's completely just surrounded by flame on every side. And so he stops to take out a recording device, you know, instead of saving himself from impending burning alive. He takes out a recording device to leave his kids a message. And it's not just like, hey, I got trapped. I love you. You know, I'm sorry. No. It's like a long-winded, you know, I'm sorry you always feel alone and you'll find your wolf pack. And, you know, like there's separate long-ass messages for each kid when he's surrounded by flames. Like, bro, I get it. You want to like leave a good message before you go, but try at least to save yourself. Like, what are you doing recording a novel while you're potentially going to get burned alive? Like, it just doesn't make sense. And I don't know why, as a park ranger, he would have been in there in the first place. Like, there are no fire people anywhere. You see like one sort of wide shot of a helicopter, I think it is, like dropping that like pink stuff that they use to kind of stop the flames from going past a certain point. You see that, but I don't remember seeing any other like firefighters, anyone doing anything to like mitigate the flames. It's like they're just letting these teenage kids prance around in this devastating fire. And like I said, you see Sarah Michelle Gellar for 1 minute. She goes into the hospital with her partner or someone from the FBI, I think, and asks to just see any kids, especially the ones that were on the school bus. So I imagine her role is that she knows about the werewolves, but there's just so many things in this that don't make sense to me, where the writing is just not that great. The acting, again, not that great. I would definitely put this, like I've said, in that range of if you just want to watch something with your teenage kids and you think that you can struggle bus it through, you know, and I'm sure that anyone who has teenagers has gone through, you know, television series and like cartoons and things when their kids were younger that you wish you didn't have to watch, and then it like grows on you because you've seen it so many times. Wolfpack's probably going to be that. It's going to be, hey, I really don't want to watch this, but if it's something that I can watch with my kids to like bond with them and it's something that they enjoy, I could see this being something along those lines. But as far as enjoying it as a series all on its own, I do not. I think it's really terrible. I don't know. I don't have the same 13-year-old brain, you know, that would have loved probably a show like this. So I really want like Sarah Michelle Gellar to come back and do a supernatural show that is geared more towards adults and it isn't like a teen drama series, you know. I would definitely tune in for that any day, all day long. I hope that she does get that at some point. I would love to see it. Wolfpack is not it. Like, I don't know. I'm crushed a little that this is not my adulty werewolf television show. Come on, man. Like, I know it's possible because I've read a whole bunch of books, you know, Laurel K. Hamilton, though she doesn't specifically, you know, talk about werewolves, a lot of her characters are werewolves. And I remember reading books by Anne Rice's sister, Alice Bouchard, and she does this entire series about werewolves that are a good adult fiction novel. And I would highly recommend those if you are just looking for something that kind of gives you the same werewolf fix without teenage angst. I would look to those. But I know it's possible because there are books out there. It's possible to give us like an adult geared television series, and I would love to see Sarah Michelle Gellar star in something like that. So those are my thoughts on Wolfpack. I would love to know yours if you've seen the first episode. Subscribe if you want to join the Movie Nerd family. You can find me on Instagram at Cinematic Sarcastic Podcast, and I hope to see you in the next episode.